I never thought 3 little words could destroy a marriage until I said them over breakfast on a Tuesday morning in October. "Monogamy is unrealistic," I announced to Nathan as he buttered his toast, watching his face crumple like I'd just told him Santa Claus was dead. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Eudoxia Crane, and I've always prided myself on being smarter than everyone else. At 32, I work as a dental hygienist at Bright Smiles Family Dentistry, where I spend my days cleaning teeth and listening to people's problems. I've heard enough confessions in that chair to know that everyone cheats. Everyone. The soccer moms, the churchgoers, the devoted husbands who bring their wives flowers every Friday. They all have secrets. So when I started seeing Julien Park 3 months ago, I didn't feel guilty. I felt enlightened. "What do you mean?" Nathan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He set down his coffee mug with shaking hands. My husband of 8 years had always been quiet, methodical in that boring IT consultant way. He wore the same khakis and button-down shirts every day, left for work at exactly 7:30, and came home at 5:15 to help our 7-year-old daughter Emma with homework. "I mean," I said, spreading jam on my English muffin with deliberate slowness, "that expecting one person to fulfill all your needs for an entire lifetime is a fairy tale. It's biologically impossible. Humans aren't wired for monogamy, Nathan. Just look at the divorce statistics." Emma glanced up from her cereal, her dark eyes, Nathan's eyes, darting between us. "What's monogamy, Mummy?" "Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart," Nathan said quickly. "Finish your breakfast. The bus comes in 10 minutes. I rolled my eyes. "It means being married to only one person, Emma. Like how some birds mate for life, but most don't." "Eudoxia," Nathan's voice carried a warning I chose to ignore. "What? She's 7, not 3. She can handle age-appropriate education about relationships." I took a sip of my coffee, savoring both the warmth and Nathan's obvious discomfort. "The point is, Nathan, that I've been doing some research, reading articles, talking to people. The whole concept of sexual exclusivity is a social construct designed to control women's sexuality and ensure paternal certainty before DNA testing existed." Nathan stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying we should be honest about human nature instead of pretending we're above it." I checked my phone, noting a text from Julien that made me smile. "Good morning, beautiful. Can't wait to see you tonight." Everyone has needs, Nathan. Emotional needs, physical needs, intellectual needs. It's unrealistic to expect one person to meet all of them. "But I thought," Nathan's voice cracked, "I thought we were happy. I thought we had everything we needed in each other." The vulnerability in his voice almost made me feel bad. Almost. But then I remembered how boring our life had become. Nathan's idea of excitement was trying a new restaurant or watching a different Netflix series. When was the last time he'd surprised me? When was the last time he'd made my heart race? "We are happy," I said, reaching across the table to pat his hand. "That's why I want us to be honest with each other. I want us to evolve beyond these outdated expectations." Emma finished her cereal and grabbed her backpack. "Bye, Mummy. Bye, Daddy." She kissed us both and headed for the door. "Have a good day at school, baby," Nathan called after her, his voice still strained. Once we heard the front door close, Nathan turned back to me. "Eudoxia, what exactly are you trying to tell me?" I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. "I'm trying to tell you that I've met someone who fulfills needs that you can't, and instead of lying about it or feeling guilty, I want us to acknowledge that this is normal and healthy." The color drained from Nathan's face. "You're having an affair." "I'm exploring a connection with someone who appreciates parts of me that you don't see anymore." I kept my voice calm, reasonable. "His name is Julien. He's a bartender at Vintage Wine Bar downtown. He's artistic, spontaneous, passionate about life. He makes me feel alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Nathan stood up so abruptly his chair scraped against the kitchen floor. How long? 3 months. But Nathan, this doesn't have to be a bad thing. This could be an opportunity for us to grow, to be more honest with each other about our needs. 3 months. He repeated the words like he was trying to make sense of them. 3 months of lying to me. I wasn't lying. I was protecting you from unnecessary pain while I figured out how to approach this conversation. I stood too, moving around the table toward him. Think about it rationally. Would you rather I had lied forever? Would you rather I had been miserable and resentful? At least now we can deal with reality instead of pretending. Nathan backed away from me. Reality? The reality is that you've been cheating on me for 3 months, and now you're trying to make it sound like you did me a favor. I'm trying to make it sound like what it is, an opportunity for us to evolve beyond possessive, restrictive relationship models that make people miserable. I could feel my frustration building. Why couldn't he see what I was offering him? Nathan, I'm giving you permission to explore too. If there's someone at work you're attracted to, someone who makes you feel things I don't, you can pursue that. We can both be honest about our needs. I don't want anyone else, he said quietly. I want my wife. I want the woman I married who promised to forsake all others. That woman was naive. That woman didn't understand that growth requires honesty about human nature. Nathan stared at me for a long moment. Then he grabbed his laptop bag and keys. I need to go to work. I need to think. Nathan, wait. I followed him toward the garage. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I'm trying to save our marriage by being honest about reality. He paused at the door, not turning around. No, Eudoxia. You're trying to justify betraying everything we built together. There's a difference. After he left, I sat in the kitchen feeling vindicated and frustrated in equal measure. I'd done the hard thing. I'd been honest. I'd offered him a mature, evolved approach to marriage, and he was too emotionally stunted to see the gift I was giving him. I texted Julien. Had the talk with Nathan. He's struggling with it, but I think he'll come around eventually. Can't wait to see you tonight. His response came quickly. How did he take it? Better than expected. He didn't yell or throw things. I think deep down he knows I'm right about monogamy being unrealistic. I was proud of how I'd handled the conversation. I'd been direct, honest, and rational. I'd given Nathan the opportunity to join me in a more enlightened approach to marriage. If he chose to cling to outdated notions of exclusivity, that was his choice, but at least I'd offered him something better. That evening, Nathan came home at his usual time. He helped Emma with her homework, made dinner, and went through all the motions of normal family life. But he barely spoke to me, and when he did, his voice was flat and distant. After Emma went to bed, I found him in his home office, staring at his computer screen. Nathan, we should talk more about this morning. I don't think there's anything left to say. Of course there is. We need to discuss boundaries, expectations, how we're going to make this work for both of us. He finally looked at me, and I was startled by the emptiness in his eyes. Make what work, Eudoxia? Our marriage, our new understanding. There is no new understanding. There's just you telling me that our marriage vows meant nothing to you. I sighed. Nathan, you're being dramatic. Marriage vows were written in a different era, when people died at 40 and didn't have time to grow beyond their initial choices. We're living longer, more complex lives now. We need relationship structures that acknowledge that complexity. What I need, he said, turning back to his computer, is time to process what you've told me. I left him alone, confident that, given time, he'd see the wisdom in what I was proposing. Nathan was logical, methodical. Once he thought it through rationally, he'd realized that I was offering us both freedom and honesty, instead of the slow death of pretending we could be everything to each other forever. I was wrong about a lot of things, but I was especially wrong about Nathan. The next morning, I woke up to find him already gone. He'd left a note saying he was staying at his brother Leo's house for a few days to think. Emma found the note first. "Why is Daddy staying at Uncle Leo's?" she asked, her voice small and worried. "He just needs some space to think about grown-up things," I told her, making her breakfast. "Sometimes adults need time apart to figure things out." But even as I said it, I felt the first flutter of unease. This wasn't how I'd expected things to go. Nathan was supposed to be grateful for my honesty, not running away from it. 2 weeks after Nathan moved to Leo's house, I decided it was time to stop letting him sulk and start building support for my position. If Nathan wouldn't listen to reason from me, maybe he'd listen to it from our friends and family. Friday night, I met Julien at Vintage Wine Bar, where he worked behind the polished mahogany bar that stretched along the back wall. The place was exactly what you'd expect from a wine bar in our suburban town. Exposed brick, dim lighting, and the kind of carefully curated atmosphere that made people feel sophisticated for drinking a $15 glass of Pinot Grigio. "How's Nathan handling everything?" Julien asked as he poured my usual Sauvignon Blanc. At 30, he had the kind of effortless charm that came from years of bartending, knowing exactly what to say to make people feel special while keeping enough distance to avoid real commitment. "He's being stubborn," I said, watching him work. Julien moved with a fluid grace that Nathan had never possessed. Where Nathan was methodical and predictable, Julien was spontaneous and exciting. "He's staying at his brother's place, acting like I committed some terrible crime instead of just being honest about human nature." "Give him time," Julien said, but I caught something in his tone that I didn't like. A distance that hadn't been there before. "This kind of thing is hard for traditional guys to process." "Traditional," I repeated. "That's exactly the problem. Nathan's stuck in this 1950s mindset about marriage and relationships. He can't see that what I'm offering us is actually more honest and healthy than pretending we can be everything to each other forever." Julien nodded, but he was already moving down the bar to help another customer. I watched him laugh with a blonde woman in her 20s, leaning across the bar to hear her order. The easy flirtation that had once made me feel special suddenly seemed less exclusive. Saturday evening was Leo's birthday dinner at Nathan's parents' house. I almost didn't go, but I realized it was the perfect opportunity to help our social circle understand my perspective. If I could get a few people on my side, Nathan would start to see that his reaction was disproportionate. The Crane family home was one of those sprawling suburban houses that screamed successful middle class. Cathedral ceilings, granite countertops, and family photos covering every available surface. Nathan's mother Deborah had outdone herself with the decorations, transforming the dining room into something worthy of a magazine spread. I arrived fashionably late, wearing the red dress that Nathan used to say was his favorite. Emma ran to hug me, and I felt a pang of guilt seeing how excited she was to have both parents in the same room. "Mummy, Daddy's here too. Are you coming home now?" "We're still figuring things out, sweetheart," I said, glancing across the room to where Nathan stood talking to his father. He looked good, better than he had in months, actually. He'd gotten a haircut, and there was something different about the way he carried himself, more confident somehow. The dinner conversation started normally enough. Leo opened presents, Deborah fussed over the meal, and everyone made small talk about work and Emma's school. But I could feel the tension underneath it all, the way conversations died when I joined them, the careful politeness that meant everyone knew about Nathan and me. Finally, over dessert, I decided to address the elephant in the room. "I know everyone's wondering about Nathan and me," I said, setting down my fork. "And I want you all to know that we're working through some differences about what modern marriage should look like." The table went quiet. Emma was in the living room watching a movie with her cousin, so I felt free to speak openly. "The thing is," I continued, "Nathan and I have different perspectives on exclusivity in relationships. I believe that expecting one person to meet all your emotional and physical needs for an entire lifetime is unrealistic. It's a beautiful ideal, but it's not based in biological reality. Nathan's brother Leo shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Eudoxia, maybe this isn't the best time. Actually, I think it's exactly the right time, I interrupted. Because I think we all need to be more honest about this stuff. How many couples do we know who are secretly miserable because they are trying to live up to impossible standards? How many people are having affairs because they're too ashamed to admit that monogamy doesn't work for them? Deborah's face had gone stone cold. Are you saying that you've been unfaithful to my son? I'm saying that I've been honest about forming a connection with someone who fulfills needs that Nathan can't or won't fulfill. And instead of lying about it or feeling guilty, I want us to acknowledge that this is normal and healthy. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan stared at his plate, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. Jesus, Eudoxia, Leo said finally. You're talking about cheating on my brother, like it's some kind of enlightened philosophy. I'm talking about evolution beyond possessive relationship models that make people miserable, I shot back. Look at the divorce statistics, Leo. Look at how many people are secretly unhappy in their marriages. At least I'm being honest about reality, instead of pretending that fairy tale love conquers all. Fairy tale love? Deborah's voice was ice cold. You mean like the vows you made to my son 8 years ago? For better or worse, forsaking all others? Those vows were written in an era when people died at 40 and didn't have time to grow beyond their initial choices, I said, repeating the argument I'd made to Nathan. We're living longer, more complex lives now. We need relationship structures that acknowledge that complexity. Nathan finally looked up. Eudoxia, stop. Stop what? Stop being honest. Stop trying to save our marriage by acknowledging reality. Stop humiliating yourself, he said quietly. Stop humiliating Emma. Stop humiliating me. I'm not humiliating anyone. I'm trying to have an adult conversation about the future of our relationship. My sister Marina, who had been quiet through most of the dinner, finally spoke up. I think what Eudoxia is trying to say is that traditional marriage models don't work for everyone. There are lots of different ways to structure relationships now. Polyamory, open marriages, ethical non-monogamy. Ethical non-monogamy, Nathan repeated. Is that what we're calling it? It's what it is, I said. As opposed to the unethical monogamy, where people lie and sneak around and pretend they don't have needs their spouse can't meet. Leo stood up abruptly. I think I need some air. Leo, wait, I called after him. I'm not the enemy here. I'm trying to be honest about something everyone thinks but no one talks about. But he was already heading for the back door. One by one, the others began making excuses and leaving the table. Within 10 minutes, it was just Nathan, Emma, and me left in the dining room. Well, I said, attempting a laugh, I guess I know where everyone stands on progressive relationship models. Nathan was gathering Emma's things. We're leaving. Nathan, wait. Let's talk about this rationally. There's nothing rational about what you just did, he said without looking at me. Emma, say goodbye to your mother. As they left, I felt a mixture of frustration and vindication. They were all too conventional, too stuck in outdated thinking to understand what I was offering. But at least now, everyone knew where things stood. At least now, I didn't have to pretend anymore. I drove home alone, past the wine bar where Julien was working. I thought about stopping in, but something held me back. Maybe it was the way he'd seemed distant earlier, or maybe it was the look of complete disappointment on Nathan's face as he'd left his parents' house. For the first time since this whole thing started, I wondered if I'd made a mistake. Not in having feelings for Julien, those were real and valid, but maybe in how I'd handled telling Nathan. Maybe in thinking that everyone would understand if I just explained it correctly. But no, I pushed those doubts away. I'd been brave enough to be honest about human nature. If other people couldn't handle that honesty, it said more about them than it did about me. I was still telling myself that when I got home and found Nathan's tablet on the kitchen counter. He'd forgotten it in his rush to leave. The screen was unlocked, showing his email inbox. And right there at the top was an email from someone named Ruby Gold at Goldstein and Associates Family Law. My blood ran cold as I read the subject line. Consultation follow-up, Nathan Crane. Nathan had been talking to a divorce lawyer. Monday morning at the dental clinic, I was still reeling from the discovery of Nathan's email to the lawyer. I'd spent the weekend calling and texting him, trying to get him to talk to me, but he'd only responded once. Emma and I are fine. Please give us space. Give them space, like I was some kind of threat to my own family. You look terrible, said Rebecca, one of the other hygienists, as we prepared for the morning patients. Everything okay at home? I saw an opportunity and took it. Actually, no. Nathan and I are going through some relationship issues. He's having trouble accepting that I want us to have a more honest, open marriage. Rebecca's eyebrows shot up. Open marriage? It's not as scandalous as it sounds, I said, arranging my instruments. Lots of couples are exploring non-monogamous relationship models these days. The research shows that sexual exclusivity isn't natural for humans. We're just trying to be honest about our needs instead of pretending we can be everything to each other forever. So you're seeing other people? I've formed a connection with someone, yes, and I want Nathan to feel free to do the same if he meets someone who fulfills needs I can't meet. I kept my voice casual, professional. It's actually a more honest and ethical approach than traditional monogamy, where people lie and sneak around. By lunchtime, word had spread through the clinic. I could tell because conversation stopped when I entered rooms, and I caught people whispering in the break room. But I told myself this was good. People needed to hear about alternative relationship models. Maybe some of them would be inspired to be more honest in their own marriages. Dr. Patterson, the clinic owner, called me into his office at the end of the day. Eudoxia, I need to talk to you about maintaining appropriate boundaries with patients and staff regarding personal matters. I'm sorry? I've had several staff members express concern about discussions of your personal life that are making them uncomfortable. I felt my face flush. I was just being honest about my situation. I thought people would appreciate knowing that there are alternatives to traditional relationship models. I understand you're going through a difficult time, Dr. Patterson said carefully. But discussing intimate details of your marriage at work isn't appropriate. I need you to keep personal matters personal while you're here. I nodded, but inside I was furious. Here was another example of people being too conventional, too closed-minded to handle honest discussions about human sexuality and relationships. That evening, I picked up Emma from Nathan's mother's house, where she'd been staying after school since Nathan moved out. Deborah was cold but civil, which was an improvement from the night of Leo's birthday dinner. "Mummy, why can't Daddy come home?" Emma asked in the car. "Daddy and I are having some grown-up disagreements about our relationship," I told her. "Sometimes adults need space to figure things out. But I miss him, and I miss our family dinners." The pain in her voice made my chest tight. "I know, sweetheart. I miss him too. But sometimes being honest about problems is the only way to fix them." "What problems?" "How do you explain adult relationship dynamics to a 7-year-old? Daddy and I have different ideas about what marriage should look like. I think married people should be free to have friends who are special to them, and Daddy thinks married people should only be special to each other." "Like boyfriend and girlfriend friends?" I was impressed by her intuition. "Something like that. But the important thing is that Daddy and I both love you very much, no matter what happens between us." That night, after Emma was asleep, I drove to Vintage Wine Bar. I needed to see Julien, needed the validation of someone who understood what I was going through. But when I got there, Julien was busy with a group of women celebrating someone's birthday. He smiled and waved when he saw me, but didn't come over immediately. I sat at the end of the bar, nursing a glass of wine and watching him work the crowd. When he finally made it over to me, there was something different in his demeanor, more distant, more professional. "Hey, beautiful, how are you holding up?" "It's been a rough few days," I said. "Nathan's being completely unreasonable. He's talking to divorce lawyers, turning his family against me, acting like I committed some terrible crime instead of just being honest about my feelings. Julien nodded sympathetically, but he was already scanning the bar for other customers who needed attention. That's tough. These transitions are always hard. Transitions? I repeated. Julien, I'm not transitioning away from my marriage. I'm trying to evolve it into something more honest and sustainable. Right, of course. But he was already moving away. I should check on those ladies. They're running up quite a tab. I sat there for another hour, watching Julien charm other customers while barely acknowledging me. When I finally left, he gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and promised to call soon. But he didn't call. Not Tuesday, not Wednesday, not Thursday. Thursday afternoon, I was cleaning Mrs. Henderson's teeth when she brought up the elephant in the room. I heard about you and Nathan, she said around the instruments in her mouth. I paused my scaling. Oh? My daughter goes to school with Emma. Some of the other parents have been talking. My stomach dropped. Talking about what? About your arrangement. About how you're seeing someone else but still married to Nathan. I set down my instruments and looked at her directly. Mrs. Henderson, I hope people aren't spreading rumors about my family. Well, honey, when you tell people at work that you're in an open marriage, word gets around. This is a small town. The rest of the appointment was awkward. After Mrs. Henderson left, I realized that my attempts to educate people about alternative relationship models had backfired. Instead of seeing me as progressive and honest, people were seeing me as the woman who was cheating on her husband and trying to justify it with fancy terminology. Friday afternoon, I got a text from Nathan. Need to pick up some things from the house. We'll be there at 6 p.m. I was waiting when he arrived, hoping we could finally have a rational conversation about our situation, but he wasn't alone. A woman was with him, tall, brunette, professionally dressed. She stayed in the car, while Nathan came to the door. Who's that? I asked. My lawyer, Nathan said simply. I'm here to get some documents and clothes. Nathan, we need to talk. This whole thing has gotten out of hand. You're right, he said, stepping past me into the house. It has gotten out of hand. That's why I'm taking legal steps to protect myself and Emma. I followed him upstairs to our bedroom, watching him pack a suitcase with methodical precision. Protect yourself from what? I'm your wife, Nathan. I'm trying to save our marriage. By humiliating me in front of my family, by telling people at work that you're in an open marriage, by having an affair and calling it enlightened. I never said we were in an open marriage. I said I wanted us to consider more honest relationship models. Nathan stopped packing and looked at me. Eudoxia, do you hear yourself? You've been cheating on me for months. You announced it to my family over dinner, and now you're surprised that there are consequences. The only consequences are the ones you're creating by being stubborn and conventional. Conventional, he repeated. You mean like expecting my wife to honor her marriage vows? Those vows were written in a different era, I know. You've mentioned that. Nathan closed his suitcase. But here's the thing, Eudoxia. I still believe in them. I still believe in the promises we made to each other. And if you don't, then we don't have a marriage worth saving. He headed for the door, then paused. Ruby will be in touch about the custody schedule for Emma. I want this to be as easy as possible for her. Custody schedule? My voice came out higher than I intended. Nathan, you can't just take my daughter away from me because you're too emotionally stunted to evolve. I'm not taking her away from you. I'm making sure she has stability while her parents figure out what their relationship is going to look like going forward. After he left, I sat in our empty bedroom, feeling like the world had tilted off its axis. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. I was supposed to be the brave one, the honest one, the one willing to face reality about human nature and relationships. Instead, I was sitting alone in a house that felt too big and too quiet, while my husband drove away with a lawyer who was probably billing him $300 an hour to help him punish me for being honest. I called Julien, but it went straight to voicemail. I called Marina, who listened sympathetically, but couldn't really help. I even considered calling my father, but I knew he'd just give me some lecture about the sanctity of marriage. For the first time since this whole thing started, I wondered if everyone else was right and I was wrong. But that was impossible. I'd done my research. I'd read the articles about polyamory and ethical non-monogamy. I'd been honest about human nature in a way that most people were too cowardly to attempt. The problem wasn't me. The problem was that everyone else was too conventional, too stuck in outdated thinking to understand what I was offering. I just had to stay strong until they came around. The meeting with Ruby Gold was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 2 p.m. Nathan had texted me the address and a simple message. Please be on time. Ruby's time is valuable. I spent Monday night preparing my arguments. I researched ethical non-monogamy, polyamory, and progressive relationship models. I found articles by respected psychologists and relationship experts who supported alternative approaches to marriage. I was going to show this lawyer, and Nathan, that I wasn't some cheating wife trying to justify bad behavior. I was a woman who had the courage to be honest about human nature. Goldstein and Associates occupied the top floor of a glass office building downtown. The reception area was all clean lines and expensive furniture, the kind of place that charged premium rates for premium results. Ruby Gold's office was corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Ruby herself was not what I'd expected. She was younger than me, maybe 35, with dark hair pulled back in a sleek bun and the kind of composed confidence that came from winning battles in courtrooms. She wore a navy suit that probably cost more than I made in a month, and when she shook my hand, her grip was firm and direct. Mrs. Crane, she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk, thank you for coming in. I know this is a difficult time for your family. Nathan was already seated in the chair next to mine. He looked calm, composed, like he'd been preparing for this moment for weeks, which, I realized, he probably had been. I want to start by saying that I hope we can resolve this situation amicably, I said, settling into my chair. I think there's been a lot of miscommunication about what I've been trying to accomplish in my marriage. Ruby nodded politely. Why don't you tell me your perspective on the situation? This was my chance. I took a deep breath and launched into my carefully prepared explanation. I believe that traditional monogamy is an outdated relationship model that doesn't reflect modern understanding of human psychology and sexuality. The research shows that humans aren't naturally monogamous. We're pair-bonding creatures, but we're also capable of forming meaningful connections with multiple people. What I've been trying to do is move my marriage toward a more honest, ethical framework that acknowledges these realities instead of pretending they don't exist. Ruby listened without interruption, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she looked up. And how did you implement this new framework in your marriage? I formed a connection with someone who fulfills emotional and physical needs that Nathan couldn't or wouldn't fulfill. Instead of lying about it or sneaking around, I chose to be honest with Nathan about the relationship. When you say you formed a connection, can you be more specific? I felt my cheeks warm. I began seeing someone romantically. Julien Park, he's a bartender at Vintage Wine Bar. And when you say seeing someone romantically, what exactly does that mean? We have an intimate relationship, emotional and physical. You're having sex with him? The bluntness of her words caught me off guard. We're intimate, yes, but it's not just physical. We connect on levels that Nathan and I haven't connected on in years. Ruby made another note. And how long has this relationship been going on? About 4 months now. Nathan shifted in his chair. I glanced at him, but his expression was unreadable. And during these 4 months, were you still having sexual relations with your husband? Occasionally, yes, but Nathan and I had grown distant physically. Our intimate life had become routine, obligatory. So you were having sexual relationships with both men simultaneously. I was exploring different aspects of my sexuality and emotional needs with two different people, yes. Ruby set down her pen and looked at me directly. Mrs. Crane, I appreciate your candor, but I need to ask you some direct questions about the practical implications of your exploration. Of course. Have you been tested for sexually transmitted infections since beginning your relationship with Mr. Park? The question hit me like a slap. What? STI testing. Given that you were having unprotected sex with multiple partners. Julien and I used protection most of the time. Most of the time? I felt my face burning. We were careful, and Julien he's not promiscuous. How do you know that? Because I know him. We talk about everything. Ruby made another note. Mrs. Crane, Mr. Park is a single man who works as a bartender. Is it your understanding that you're his only sexual partner? We haven't discussed exclusivity in detail, but I know he cares about me. So you don't actually know whether he's seeing other people? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I realized I didn't know. Julien and I had never had that conversation. I'd assumed that what we had was special, exclusive, even if my marriage wasn't. Mrs. Crane, Ruby continued, I have some bank statements here that Mr. Crane provided. Can you explain a transfer of $800 to Julien Park on September 15th? My stomach dropped. I'd forgotten about that. Julien was having some financial difficulties. His car needed repairs and he couldn't afford them. I helped him out. You gave your lover $800 without discussing it with your husband. It was my money too. I work, I contribute to our household income. From the joint account that you share with your husband. Yes, but... Mrs. Crane, are you aware that in this state using marital assets to support an extramarital relationship can be considered dissipation of marital funds? I looked at Nathan, but he was staring out the window. I was helping a friend. A friend you're having an affair with. A friend I have feelings for. Ruby leaned back in her chair. Mrs. Crane, I want to make sure I understand your position. You believe that your husband should accept your extramarital relationship because you've decided that monogamy is unrealistic. You've used marital funds to support your lover. You've discussed your situation with co-workers, family members, and other parents at your daughter's school, and you believe this is all justified because you're being honest about human nature. When she put it like that, it sounded terrible. But she was leaving out the important parts, the research, the psychological evidence, the fact that I was trying to save our marriage by being honest instead of lying. You're oversimplifying, I said. I'm trying to evolve our relationship beyond possessive, restrictive models that make people miserable. I'm offering Nathan the same freedom I'm taking for myself. Has Nathan expressed any interest in this freedom? Not yet, but that's because he's stuck in conventional thinking about relationships. So he's told you he doesn't want other relationships. He's told me he wants traditional monogamy, yes. And you've decided that his preferences for his own marriage are invalid because they don't align with your research on human sexuality. I felt trapped. Every answer I gave seemed to make me sound worse. I'm trying to save our marriage by being honest about needs that aren't being met. Mrs. Crane, whose needs aren't being met in your marriage? Both of ours. Nathan just isn't self-aware enough to realize it. Ruby and Nathan exchanged a look that I didn't like. There was something in it that felt like shared understanding, like they'd discussed this before. Mrs. Crane, I have one more question for you. If your husband had come to you 4 months ago and told you that he was going to start having sex with another woman because monogamy was unrealistic, how would you have reacted? The question stopped me cold. I tried to imagine Nathan telling me he was seeing someone else, using my own arguments to justify it. The thought made me physically ill. That's different, I said finally. How is it different? Because Nathan isn't the type of person who would do that. You mean he's the type of person who honors his commitments? I mean he's conventional. He doesn't think outside the box about relationships. So it's different because you've decided that your needs justify breaking your marriage vows. But his need for fidelity, his need for honesty, his need for a partner who keeps her promises, don't matter. I felt like I was drowning. Nothing I said was coming out right. Ruby was twisting my words, making my honest attempt to save our marriage sound like selfish betrayal. I think we're done here, I said, standing up. It's clear that you've already made up your mind about this situation. Mrs. Crane, Ruby said calmly, I haven't made up my mind about anything. I'm simply trying to understand the facts of your situation so I can advise my client on how to proceed. Your client is my husband. We're supposed to be working together to save our family. Nathan finally spoke. Eudoxia, we are working together. We're working together to figure out what's best for Emma while her parents get divorced. The word hit me like a physical blow. Divorced, not separated, not taking a break, not working through problems. Divorced. Nathan, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. I looked between Nathan and Ruby, seeing something I hadn't noticed before. The way they sat, just slightly closer together, than was strictly professional. The way Ruby's voice softened when she spoke to him. The way Nathan looked at her, not with the distant politeness he'd been showing me, but with something warmer. Oh my God, I said, you're sleeping with her. Ruby's expression didn't change, but Nathan's face flushed. Eudoxia, you're sleeping with your divorce lawyer. You're having an affair while accusing me of destroying our marriage. I'm not having an affair, Nathan said quietly. I'm separated from my wife, who announced that she doesn't believe in monogamy after she'd been cheating on me for months. Ruby and I have developed feelings for each other, but we've been completely honest about it. Honest? I laughed, but it came out shrill and bitter. You've been planning this divorce while pretending to consider working things out. I've been protecting myself and my daughter while my wife justified betraying our family. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. This is unbelievable. I tried to save our marriage by being honest about human nature, and you respond by actually having an affair. Eudoxia, Nathan called after me. The difference is that I'm not married anymore. I turned back. What do you mean you're not married anymore? Nathan and Ruby exchanged another look. Then Ruby opened a file folder on her desk. Mrs. Crane, she said, your husband filed for divorce 3 weeks ago. You're being served with papers today.